welcome to the news today. We begin with a special segment bringing you live the speech of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, who's set to address the UN General Assembly in New York shortly amid unrest in the West Bank that has included protests against his government and against him. With me right now is Israeli Ambassador Yitzhak Lebanon. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Also, military correspondent Shai Ben-Ari. Good evening. And also diplomatic correspondent Eli Ochemberg. Good evening. Eli, I will start with you. What is expected? Because yesterday we just heard that after Mahmoud Abbas heard that Barack Obama didn't even mention the Palestinian issue, he did some adjustments in his speech to address maybe the UN and the world in a different way.
Well, Abbas is definitely arriving very much frustrated to this General Assembly. He wanted to bring a diplomatic bombshell. We've been talking about it for weeks, but after a meeting with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, he reportedly was under some pressure from Washington to not threat Israel in any way as maybe he wanted to.
Yeah, I would just say that we are just seeing Mahmoud Abbas approaching the stand, and he will just take his place in just in a short while. Meanwhile, of course, they will present him. And let's hear and let's go to the speech of Mahmoud Abbas in the General Assembly, and we will be here to understand and hear what he has to say.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. Mr. Mogen Sliketoft, President of the General Assembly. Excellency Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations. Excellencies, heads of delegations, ladies and gentlemen. I come before you today from Palestine to sound the alarm about what is happening in Jerusalem. Indeed, extremist Israeli groups are committing repeated, systematic incursions upon the Al-Aqsa Mosque to impose a new reality and divide the Al-Haram al-Sharif temporarily, thus allowing extremists under the protection of Israeli occupying forces and accompanying ministers and Knesset members to enter the mosque at certain times, while preventing Muslim worshippers from accessing and entering the mosque at those times and freely exercising their religious rights. This is the scheme that the Israeli government is pursuing in direct violation of the status quo prevailing before 1967 and thereafter. By doing so, the occupying power is committing a grave mistake, because we will not accept this, and our Palestinian people will not allow the implementation of this illegal scheme, which is aggravating the sensitivities of Palestinians and Muslims everywhere. I call on the Israeli government, before it is too late, to cease its use of brutal force, to impose its plans, to undermine the Islamic and Christian sacred sites in Jerusalem, particularly its actions at Al-Aqsa Mosque. For such actions will convert the conflict from a political one to a religious one, thus creating an explosive situation in Jerusalem and in the remaining occupied Palestinian territory. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, it is my honor to come before you to speak on behalf of the State of Palestine before your esteemed General Assembly in this session, which coincides with the 70th anniversary of the United Nations. The United Nations, which has made the promotion and protection of international peace and security and the preservation of human rights its most central goals. The question of Palestine was one of the first just issues brought before the United Nations from its inception. Yet, and regrettably, this issue has remained unsolved, as the organization and its members continue to be unable to end this injustice inflicted upon our people and to assist our people to exercise their right of self-determination and freedom in their independent and sovereign state. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to reconsider the history of the question of Palestine and the relevant United Nations resolutions. You will realize the obvious truth. That is, that a historic injustice has been inflicted upon a people and a homeland, a people that had lived peacefully in their land and made genuine intellectual, cultural, and humanitarian contributions to mankind. This people does not deserve to be deprived of its homeland, to die in exile or be swallowed by the sea, or to spend its life fleeing from one refugee camp to the other. Yet, regrettably, its just cause remains at a standstill after the passage of all these years. Our people have placed their hopes on the countries of this organization to help them to gain their freedom, independence, and sovereignty, so that their wish and rights to their own state, like all other peoples on earth, can be achieved, along with a just solution for the Palestine refugee question in accordance with General Assembly Resolution 194 and the Arab Peace Initiative. Is it too much to ask? Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, we are advocates of rightness, justice, and peace. While Palestine was partitioned into two states, according to which Israel was established 67 years ago, the second part of that resolution still awaits implementation. Palestine, the observer state at the United Nations, deserves full recognition and full membership. It is unconscionable in light of all the enormous sacrifices we have made. It is unconscionable in light of all our enormous sacrifices, our patience over all these years of exile and suffering, and our acceptance to make peace according to the two-state solution based on international law, the relevant United Nations resolutions, the Arab Peace Initiative, and the Quartet roadmap. It is unconscionable that the question of Palestine remain unresolved for all these decades. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the continuation of the status quo is unacceptable because it means giving in to the logic of brutal force being inflicted by the Israeli government. This government continues its illegal settlement expansion in the West Bank, especially in occupied East Jerusalem. It continues its blockade of the Gaza Strip, thus deepening the immense suffering of our people there. This is done in defiance of UN resolutions and agreements signed between the two sides, between us and them, under international auspices. Here, we recall the words of the late Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in 1976. When he stated that Israel will become an apartheid state if it continues to occupy the Palestinian territory. And Yitzhak Rabin described the Israeli settlements on Palestinian land as a cancer. This is what Yitzhak Rabin has said. Why do they do that to us? The persistence of this matter prompts us to ask, do the votes by democratic countries against Palestine-related resolutions and Palestine's legitimate rights serve peace and those who believe in the two-state solution, or do they rather serve and encourage extremists and deepen their hatred and racism, making them believe that they are above the law to the point where they commit the burning of a Palestinian family, a whole Palestinian family, in the town of Douma in the West Bank, thus claiming the life of an infant, Ali Dawabshi, and his father and mother. What is left of the family is an orphan child, Ahmed, 4-year-old, who teeters between life and death in hospital as a result of his burns, while the killers remain free and have not yet been arrested. Where is justice? Where is justice? Where is democracy and the democratic state that claims democracy and the rule of law? This is not the first crime. Before that, they burned alive, then killed the Palestinian child Muhammad Abu Khdeir in Jerusalem and the child Muhammad al-Durra in Gaza. And before them, thousands have been killed in Gaza and the West Bank. We still remember the Deir Yassin massacre of 1948 and all other crimes. All these are crimes that have remained with impunity. Until when will Israel remain above international law and without accountability? Due to time constraints, I shall not be able to discuss in detail how many Israeli violations are being committed against our people, how many repressive laws have been issued by successive Israeli governments, the latest of which is the formal instructions, governmental instructions given to fire live ammunition at and arrest and repress peaceful Palestinian demonstrators. Where do you see this happening? Why is it happening? Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, we do not respond to the Israeli occupation's hatred and brutality with the same. Instead, we are working to spread the culture of peace and coexistence between our people and in our region. We are anxious to witness the day when our people and all peoples in our region will enjoy peace, security, stability, and prosperity. This cannot be achieved with continued occupation, settlement, colonization, the wall, the burning of people. I'm saying again, the burning of people, places of worship and homes, the killing of youth, children and infants, the burning of crops, and the arrest and detention of people without charge or trial. How can a state claiming to be an oasis of democracy and claiming that its courts and security apparatus function according to the law, how can such a state accept the existence of a so-called price tag gangs and other known terrorist organizations that terrorize and intimidate our people, their property and holy sites, all under the sight of the Israeli army and police, which do not deter or punish, but rather provide them with protection. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, is it not time to end this injustice? Is it not time to stop this suffering? Is it not time for the racist annexation wall to be dismantled? Is it not time for the humiliating and degrading checkpoints and barriers set up by the Israeli occupying forces in our land to be removed? Is it not time for the Israeli blockade imposed on the Gaza Strip to be lifted so that our people can move in freedom and dignity in their own homeland and outside? Is it not time to end the racist, terrorist, colonial settlement of our land, which is destroying the two-state solution? Is it not time for the 6,000 Palestinian prisoners and detainees in Israeli jails to see the light of freedom and to live among their families and communities? Is it not time for the longest occupation in history, suffocating our people, to come to an end? We ask you this question.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, despite all the obstacles imposed by the occupation, we, since the establishment of the Palestinian National Authority and until this moment, have worked incessantly to build the foundations of our state, its infrastructure, and sovereign national institutions. We have made real progress on the ground as affirmed by several international bodies, especially the United Nations, the World Bank, and International Monetary Fund. We will continue our efforts and work with the support of our brothers and friends in order to strengthen our state, committed to international standards, the rule of law, and transparency as a democratic and modern state of law. In this context, we highly value the efforts of the AHLC group under Norway's chairmanship and urge donor countries to continue to support a better life for our people and our efforts to develop our state institutions. Our accession to membership of international organizations and treaties and conventions is not directed against anyone. Let me repeat, it is not directed against anyone. Rather, it is a measure aimed at safeguarding our rights, protecting our people, harmonizing the laws and regulations of our country with international standards, and strengthening its international legal status and identity. Is this a mistake? In regard to the internal Palestinian situation, we are determined to preserve the unity of our land and our people. We will not accept temporary solutions or a fragmented state. We will not allow this, and we will not allow those who are seeking to do this to do it. We, rather, will seek to form a national unity government that functions according to the program of the Palestine Liberation Organization and to pursue hold presidential and legislative elections. Mr. President, Palestine is the country of holiness and peace. It is the birthplace of Christ, the messenger of love and peace, and the Isra and Mi'raj, ascension to heaven, a night journey of Muhammad, peace be upon him, who was sent as a mercy unto the world. This is Palestine that is still looking for peace, and its people want to live in their homeland in safety, security, harmony, stability, and good neighborliness with all peoples and countries of the region. This is attested to by their cultural, humanitarian, and spiritual contributions to humanity all along from the start. Just recently, specifically on the 17th of May 2015, two nuns from Palestine, namely Alphonsine Ghattas and Maryam Bawardi, were canonized as saints by His Holiness Pope Francis at the Vatican in the presence of tens of thousands of the faithful from around the globe. On that occasion, the flag of Palestine was raised at the Vatican, which recognized the state of Palestine as documented in the agreement signed between the Holy See and the state of Palestine. It is our hope that who have not done so will do that as soon as possible. We aspire to see the independent state of Palestine taking its rightful place among the community of nations, and we are confident that it will actively contribute to the achievement of economic, cultural, and humanitarian progress of civilization, with positive effects on our people, the region, and the entire world. It is from Palestine and with Palestine that peace will be achieved. Those who would like to seek and promote peace I repeat, those who would like to seek and promote peace and to fight terrorism should start by resolving the question of Palestine. That is the beginning or the end of everything otherwise. I take this occasion to express on behalf of my people to our thanks to all those who voted on the 10th of this month in favor of the resolution that would enable us today to raise the flag of Palestine at the United Nations headquarters. Today, or the day, God willing, is not far when we will raise the flag of Palestine in East Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Palestine. I wish also to pay tribute to the recent decisions by the European parliaments that have clearly condemned Israel's settlement activities and its products and affirmed the right of the Palestinian people to sovereignty and independence in their state alongside the state of Israel, which we recognize while Israel does not recognize our existence, and that also established a committee on the relations with Palestine. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, a number of European countries and parliaments also affirmed the recognition of the state of Palestine, thus reaffirming our natural right to independence. In this regard, we would like to thank the Kingdom of Sweden for its courage and recognition of the state of Palestine. Indeed, everyone who says that they support the two-state solution must recognize the two states, not just one. If you recognize the two-state solution, why won't you recognize the other state? Today, I call upon those countries that have not yet recognized the state of Palestine to do so. We are fully confident that they will do so based on the conviction in the justice well deserved by our people and their cause. From this rostrum at the United Nations headquarters and against the backdrop of religious holidays, I extend a sincere call to the people of Israel for peace based on justice, security, and stability for all. I also call on the Security Council and the General Assembly to uphold their responsibilities before it is too late. I do sincerely hope that they would fulfill their responsibilities before it is too late. You are all aware that Israel undermined the efforts made by the administration of President Barack Obama in the past years, most recently the efforts undertaken by Secretary of State John Kerry aimed at reaching a peace agreement through negotiations. The policies and practices of the Israeli government and the positions of its prime minister and cabinet members lead to clear conclusions. That is, they are working with all their efforts in order to destroy the two-state solution that we are seeking on the basis of the resolutions of international legitimacy. There is no other explanation. We welcome the international and European efforts, including the French initiative, calling for the formation of an international support group for the achievement of peace. The Arab states in their recent summit confirmed their support for a resolution by the Security Council that reaffirms the clear parameters for a peaceful solution in accordance with the two-state solution based on the pre-1967 borders, and that sets a time frame for ending the occupation. Since it is no longer useful to waste time in negotiations just for the sake of negotiations, what is required is to mobilize international efforts and to establish a framework to oversee an end to the occupation in line with the resolution of international legitimacy. Until then, I repeat, until then, I call upon the United Nations and particularly the Secretary General of the United Nations, the President of the General Assembly, to provide international protection for the Palestinian people in accordance with international humanitarian law. We are asking for your protection. We need your protection. We need international protection. We cannot maintain the status quo. We are being hit from all sides. Aggressions are made against us from every corner. We find no protector. The only resort we have is the United Nations. We submitted an application for this. Please, 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 we call upon you, we plead to you, we need your international protection. Ladies and gentlemen, we have tried to bring pressure to bear on Israel to implement the signed agreements and to negotiate in conformity with a two-state solution through direct contacts with the Israeli government. Yes, we do maintain direct contacts with the Israeli government, as well as through the United States, the Russian Federation, the European Union, and the United Nations, the Quartet members, and other parties. However, the Israeli government insisted on continuing its destruction of the two-state solution and on entrenching two regimes on the ground. An apartheid regime that is currently in place and imposed on the territory of the state of Palestine and against the Palestinian people on one hand, and another regime of extensive privileges and protection to the Israeli settlers on the other hand. On our occupied territory, the occupied territory has two systems, the apartheid system and the other system that extends extensive privileges to the Israeli settlers. Is this possible? Is this admissible? This is the question we pose to the United Nations. The transitional Oslo Agreement and its annexes and the subsequent agreements signed with Israel stipulated that the agreements should be implemented within a time frame of 5 years ending in 1999. Ending with what? With full independence for the state of Palestine and the termination of the Israeli occupation. But Israel stopped the completion of the process of withdrawing its forces from areas classified as B and C, which represent, repeat, these two areas represent more than 60% of the territory of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Instead, Israel intensified its settlement activities everywhere and breached all agreements. I repeat, breached all signed accords. Some of those agreements have been signed by the current Israeli Prime Minister. Since the speech of President Obama in Cairo Let me recall here the speech made by President Obama in Cairo in 2009, in which he called for the cessation of settlement activities. What was the Israeli response? The Israeli government increased settlement activities by at least 20% in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, thus violating its obligation not to undertake any action illegally and unilaterally that would, and this is also agreed upon, that would prejudge the final solution. Moreover, the occupying power has repeatedly infringed upon the areas classified A, which are supposed to be under full Palestinian security jurisdiction and in which we have developed the institutions of our Palestinian state. Let me repeat, yes, Israel has also violated these areas. All the while, Israel refuses to review the economic agreements that control the ability of the Palestinian economy to develop and become independent. Thus, it is determined to impose dominance on Palestinian economy similar to its military and security dominance. I repeat, economic, military, and security dominance. Thus, Israel rejecting the right of the Palestinian people to development and to exploit their natural resources. Thus, Israel has destroyed the foundations upon which the political and security agreements are based, which have also been undermined by the measures taken by successive Israeli governments that have negated the transitional phase aimed at realizing the independence of our state and has thus perpetrated gross violations. All this has made the situation unsustainable. Thus, and given all that data, given that background, here we declare that as long as Israel refuses to commit to the agreements signed with us, which render us a pro forma authority without real powers, and as long as Israel refuses to cease settlement activities and to release of the Palestinian prisoners in accordance with our agreements with Israel, Israel has thus left us no choice but to insist that we will not remain the only one who violates them. We therefore declare that we cannot continue to be bound by these signed agreements with Israel, and Israel must assume fully all its responsibilities as an occupying power, because the status quo cannot continue, and the decisions of the Palestinian Central Council last March are quite specific and binding. As long as Israel is not committed to the signed agreements and undermined all agreements, we, for our part, are not committed to those agreements, and Israel must bear full responsibility for this development and this situation. This is a decision taken by the Palestinian parliament, and I am declaring it right here and now. Our patience for a long, long time has come to its end, and it seems that they are not listening to the truth, and Israel should resume its role as an occupying power and bear responsibilities under that concept. The state of Palestine, based on the 4th of June 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital, is a state under occupation. Yes, we are under occupation, exactly as many countries had the same status during the Second World War. It is to be recalled that 137 states, I repeat, 137 states recognized our state. That is 4 times the number of states that recognized Israel at its foundation. I repeat, 137 countries. and there is universal recognition of the right of self-determination of our people. Here I would like to further recall of General Assembly Resolution 6719 of 2012, which emphasized that, which accorded to Palestine observer state status, reaffirmed that the Executive Committee of the Palestine Liberation Organization would be the interim government of the State of Palestine, and that the Palestinian National Council is the Palestinian Parliament of the State of Palestine. Why, given all that, Israel does not recognize the State of Palestine? I must reiterate, the current situation is unsustainable, and we shall start implementing the declaration I have just announced by legal means. We shall not resort to violence. We shall resort to peaceful and legal means to implement that. Either the Palestinian National Authority would be a transitional power, moving the Palestinian people from under occupation to independence, or Israel, the occupying power, must fully bear its responsibilities. At the same time, and based on our commitment to the principles of international law, the State of Palestine will continue its efforts to accede to international conventions and organizations. All of them, all international organizations. This is our right to accede to all of them, because this would be fully in line with and harmonizing our status with international law. And we will move forward in the defense of our people under occupation through all available legal and peaceful means, including as a high contracting party to the Geneva Conventions of 1949, and also a state party to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Yes, Palestine is a member of the International Criminal Court. Those who fear international law and international courts must cease from committing crimes. We do not like to go to the International Criminal Court, but aggression forces us to do so, and we will seek support from all international organizations, including the International Criminal Court. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, despite all that, my hands remain outstretched for the just peace that will guarantee my people's rights, freedom, and human dignity. I say to our neighbors, sons of the Israeli people, sons and daughters of the Israeli people, that peace is in your own interest and in our own interest and in the interest of your future generations, our future generations. Narrow vision is destructive. To be introvert is destructive. It is my sincere hope that you will consider the dangerous reality on the ground and look to the future and accept for the Palestinian people, repeat, accept for the Palestinian people what you accept for yourselves. Then you will find that the achievement of peace will be possible and you will enjoy security, safety, peace, and stability. These values are the aspirations that we also seek to realize for our Palestinian people. Maratan, once again, I thank you for your kind attention, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, may peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon all of you. Thank you.
And yes, we are back here in our live broadcast from I24 News, the news today. And with me again is Ambassador Itzhak Lebanon. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
And also military correspondent Shaban Ari. Good evening.
Good evening.
And diplomatic correspondent Eli Ochenberg. Good evening. Ambassador Lebanon, I will start with you with the big declaration of, it was, let's say, relatively boring speech until he put the bomb that he promised. No more status quo, no more agreements if Israel is continuing to occupy the Palestinian state.
Well, I think that to the best, this kind of speech is good for the Palestinian parliament and not from the podium of the United Nations, coming with some information that Abu Mazen, Mahmoud Abbas, President Abbas is ready, to move on in order to solve the problem and to relieve the suffering of his own people as he described it. I think that what he did in this speech, I think a mediocre speech. I mean, there's nothing special. Even, that the fact that he says that he will not be bound anymore if Israel will not do, the things or the agreements, it doesn't work on the ground because the situation on the ground is different. He can, cut off himself from the from the taxes that we are paying him, or for the security coordination. The security coordination is not only for Israel, it's for him also. So the reality on the ground is completely different. So there's no meaning for such kind of... The only thing which bothered me really all the way during this speech, and he started, with Jerusalem, I expected that he considers himself as a serious leader. Standing at the podium, rostrum of the United Nations, which I know, I expected to have or to listen to somebody, serious and not, to navigate into false allegations here and there and repeating this all the time, which nothing is true, by the way.
I want to touch on the point where in a case that the Oslo Accords will be cancelled, what will happen in an era that Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas doesn't have a lot of popularity? People are actually going out against him. What will happen to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas himself on the streets of Palestine?
There are certain details lacking when you talk about this bombshell that was thrown by President Abbas. You could describe it as a bombshell, but it's a rather fuzzy bombshell, very vague. He chose a very vague sort of phrasing, saying that he will no longer be bound by the commitments of the agreement signed with Israel. But what does that mean? What does his future hold? Why did he not choose to resign here in front of the whole world stage at the UN? Why did he not explicitly say that military coordination was now canceled? He doesn't get into the details because apparently does not want to deal with those details right now. And he also, of course, made the statement at the end of the speech, basically saying the hands of the Palestinians are outstretched in peace to the Israelis, seemingly letting or allowing an Israeli response to this threat, let's call it, to cancel all agreements. So I would say that it's not a coincidence that we're not getting into the gritty details.
It's not a coincidence also that Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas maybe at the beginning decided that he's not going to say anything, but then when Barack Obama is not mentioning the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, maybe he's saying, you know what, I'm going to put the bomb again on the table and make you notice me because I'm here.
I'm not sure who was the target crowd of President Abbas, but we've seen a weary leader, a frustrated leader with no vision in his speech, and more than anything else, leaves the ball in the Israeli court. If Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will go tomorrow to the UN General Assembly and call for the renewal of negotiations, will reach his hand for peace, all the glory will go there. Abbas is not taking control over the situation, but just putting out there some vague and empty threats that mean nothing.
Not only vague and empty threats. I have to say that he also maybe put a trigger between Benjamin Netanyahu and Barack Obama when he is saying, well, Barack Obama really tried. He really tried to get some kind of negotiation, but the Israeli government is refusing to go back and actually breaking the efforts of Barack Obama.
It seems to be that, as we say, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The most we change and it remains the same thing. I think that Mahmoud Abbas didn't change, one iota. The second thing is I don't see really the bombshell. I mean, I will give you just an example. We have the Paris Agreement that we will pay the taxes to the Palestinians. Now, suppose, theoretically, that Israel will not do it. So what he's doing is, I will not be bound by this agreement, so I'm not going to ask you for that money. So it doesn't make any sense what he is talking or what he is saying. The second point is that
maybe this is why he begged and he thanked the people that are actually
again,
contributing money
no.
to the Palestinians, because he's telling them, okay, you know what? In just a short while, we will stop getting money from the Israelis, and then
he's asking for an international mechanism, a support mechanism. It will not work. We have been this, like 30 or for 25 or 20 years ago, when everybody thought about it was a Russian or Soviet initiative to have an international conference dealing with the Palestinian issue. So the people came and say, wait a minute, what Botswana or Rwanda or I don't know which country has to do with the Palestinian issue? The only thing is the people involved, Palestinians and Israeli, can solve. And the third point is, and this is why I'm deceived, from his speech. It seems to me that he doesn't understand that the Americans will support, as in the past, but they will not impose any solution.
I'll tell you what, I wish he would have read out his op-ed yesterday from the Huffington Post, where he had a vision. He said, let's build an international coalition to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflicts like you did with the Iranian case. This is something you put on the table. What have we heard here that is bringing something else, that is showing some hope to this stalled peace process?
Not only that, but if we are remembering, if we are hearing the speech, and we remember the speeches of Arafat, of Yasser Arafat, the former leader of the Palestinian people, he really wanted to sound like him. He really wanted to maybe to talk to the Palestinians and to tell them, you see, I am mentioning Deir Yassin. I am mentioning the occupation. I am saying apartheid. I am talking about the state of Palestine. But I'm saying that the capital is East Jerusalem.
Right. Also, he did say East Jerusalem, interestingly, when usually he would say Al-Quds, Jerusalem as a whole. Also, he did start with Jerusalem, of course. He did throw a bone to the more extremist factions within Palestinian society at the beginning of the speech, and he also engaged in some pretty radical inaccuracies when describing exactly what is happening around the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, the Temple Mount. You could even say we're talking about direct lies when you look at the words that he used to describe what Israel is doing there. But he did throw a bone there to the extremist factions. On the other hand, I wouldn't say this was a fairly strong speech. After all, the guy broke into begging midway through the speech with the phrase "please, please, please."
Please, please.
It sounds like a Beatles song.
Well, actually, in this speech, President Abbas is perpetuating, the stagnation in the situation. He's not moving on. He's not taking, as we say, in Hebrew, the chariot out of the mud. I mean, he's not doing this. I hope that probably tomorrow Prime Minister Netanyahu will do it, will help him, to start again these negotiations between us and the Palestinians, because we have to solve the situation.
Well, what are the chances that this will actually happen when we are just seeing that on a report that is coming on Haaretz newspaper tonight, seeing that Israel is going to build another, let's say...
no, to legalize something. This is completely different.
Building again in the West Bank.
It exists. They would like to legalize it. So and this is why they went to the High Court of Justice.
Well, we need to clarify this issue, obviously, and this timing, I assume, is not by coincidence to release such a statement. Obviously, if Netanyahu will not bring, a call for renewal of the peace talks tomorrow, and we have these statements while Abbas is talking, we're pretty much heading nowhere. But another interesting thing, we've been talking a lot in recent months about the really devastating situation of Abbas within his own people, within the Palestinian people in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. And if his speech was targeting them, I'm not sure that as a Palestinian I would feel very, empowered by this speech. As you said, he was begging the international community, showing, offering no new opportunities. So I'm not sure it is very much helping him in his domestic political situation either.
Yeah, but look, this speech is fueling, the tension between us and the Palestinians.
Yes.
Because he basically told the Palestinians, you know what, we are not bound
to our narrative. They've been doing bad things.
We're not bound to Israel. Israel anymore. Do whatever you want, but we're not going to be violent.
You see, he started, with Haram al-Sharif, in Jerusalem.
Yes.
He started. They are all false allegations, completely. He spoke about, the status quo before 1967. Before 1967, there were no status quo at all.
And the Rabin quote from before the first Intifada broke out, which is a completely different situation on the ground.
So, first of all, I want to thank you, Shai and Ellie, for being with me in this specific part. Shai, we will see you later on. Also, you, Ellie. In the meantime, Ellie prepared for us a piece for tonight. Mahmoud Abbas's speech at the UN is, of course, not without context, and comes amid unrest in the West Bank, including protests against the diplomatic correspondent for the news today. Eli Ochenberg looks at all the important background.
After Washington reportedly took the wind out of his sails, defusing his diplomatic bombshell before it was even launched, and world leaders, and especially the U.S. president, overlooked his main topic on the agenda, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas faces addressing the United Nations while being handed a symbolic beating. But it's not Israel, the U.S., nor the international community which is bringing him down, but his own electorate, the Palestinian people. Abbas arrived at the UN burdened with many in-house tensions, as he has been steadily losing support among Palestinians not only in the Gaza Strip but also in his home turf of the West Bank. After sporadic protests against his rule last week, growing tensions at the Temple Mount compound in Jerusalem, and surveys indicating that nearly two-thirds of the Palestinians want him to resign, a new social media movement is publicly stating, "Abbas does not represent me." With almost 250,000 members, a new Facebook page rages against the president's corrupt manners, the latest in a row of domestic criticism aimed at the 80-year-old leader.
There is no doubt that the Palestinians are unhappy with their own leadership for various reasons. There is no doubt that this gap between public expectations and what the leaders are able to offer is something that is hurting Abbas, will continue to hurt Abbas.
But perhaps it's not only a matter of different expectations, but of different goals. While Abbas is still focusing on relaunching the peace process, the majority of Palestinians no longer believe in the two-state solution or have no faith in its practicality. Instead, they do believe the PA itself is corrupt and is not doing enough to protect or take care of them.
The hope, indeed the promise from a Palestinian point of view, was that ultimately it will lead to the so-called two-state solution. And that process has failed.
When Abbas witnessed the Palestinian flag waving alongside the other 193 nations' flags in front of the UN building, he will probably acknowledge the fact he must convince not only the international community while speaking at the podium, but first and foremost, his own people.
And joining me right now here in the studio is Senior Middle East Analyst Avi Sahov. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
And former Palestinian Prisoner Affairs Minister Ashraf Al-Ajrami. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me. We'll start with you, Mr. Al-Ajrami. What do you think about the surprising, can we say, speech of Mahmoud Abbas?
I don't think it was surprising. I think it was expected, because President Mahmoud Abbas wants to deliver a message to the international community that the current situation in the Palestinian occupied territories cannot continue forever as it now. It is somehow full of tension and full of complicity. Everything is bad for the Palestinian leadership, and the Palestinian people now don't believe that the leadership can achieve the progress demanded for the Palestinian people.
Mr. Al-Ajrami, we're looking at some kind of a bomb that Mahmoud Abbas just put on the table, and he said all the agreements with Israel are cancelled if Israel is continuing in this path. What does it mean on the ground? We understand that Mahmoud Abbas is suffering from lack of popularity in the West Bank. We understand that the situation of Mahmoud Abbas is really weak right now in the Palestinian Authority. What does it mean on the ground? What will it mean to the Palestinian people?
I think he threatened the international community, mainly the United States of America, the Security Council, the General Assembly, everyone, that if this situation continues, the Palestinian Authority may collapse, and the Palestinian leadership cannot implement its part of the agreement, Oslo Agreement, Oslo Accord. I think this is the main message from President Mahmoud Abbas, but it is somehow not immediately. So he gives time for...
Gives a window of opportunity.
Yes, for the United States of America, for the quartet and the other components of the international community to intervene and to do something.
Avi, let's try and see. So if we are hearing what Mr. Al-Ajami is saying, this is only a message. This is a warning sign. I'm putting this and I'm telling you this because I had enough. You've been sitting here in the studio. You said that Mahmoud Abbas is tired. He had enough with what is happening with Israel, with the lack of peace process between Israel and the Palestinians. And this is maybe, what, a cry for help?
It is. It is. I think that you defined it exactly 100% what it was. This speech. It wasn't a speech of bombs. It wasn't a speech of explosions. He didn't announce that that's it. We canceled the Oslo Agreement. He didn't announce that's it. No more peace negotiations or anything like that. But it was a cry for help. And I think that for me to watch President Mahmoud Abbas, it was a very sad moment. I think that what I saw and I heard in his voice is desperation. Desperation from the current situation, from the situation vis-a-vis the US, vis-a-vis Israel, vis-a-vis even his own people, his own Palestinian people, that doesn't trust them, doesn't trust him anymore. And I think that that was a very sad moment in the life and in the history of Mahmoud Abbas, because I think that in the last couple of weeks, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2 weeks and a half, he understood that he cannot really go and resign. He cannot really go and announce that that's it, the canceling of the Oslo Agreement. And he cannot really do something very big and historic. For the meanwhile, the US doesn't care about the Palestinians. The President Obama doesn't even mention the word Palestinians, and his people, his own people, are going on protests, just like we saw in Ramallah and other cities, calling for his resignation. And I think that that was a very sad moment.
I want to join to the phone to this conversation Maha Mahan, an activist from the Gaza Strip, joining us on the phone from Gaza. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
Maha, when you're hearing the Palestinian president is maybe begging for help, asking the world to help him and to help the Palestinians, how do you feel when you're seeing your leader begging for help?
You know, let's not deny the fact that Palestine is occupied, and even our president needs coordination from the Israeli side to go anywhere he wants. So he just now he's in a desperate situation, begging for help because the Israeli violation is increasing every single day, not only in Jerusalem and the West Bank, but even in Gaza. Last night there was an airstrike on Gaza as well. So now he's in a desperate situation because, you know, he lost all the support. He did everything he could for the coordination with Israel, but Israel keeps violating every single right.
I will just say in this specific case yesterday there was an attack on the Gaza Strip that came after there was a rocket being fired from the Gaza Strip towards Israel. Yes. So we are not forgetting this situation. You know, it's very important to put the two things.
The violations, the Israeli violations against Al-Aqsa Mosque and against people in the West Bank and even in Gaza intensifies every day. But the rockets that got fired from Gaza into Israel wasn't from Hamas even, was from the other factions. So, you know, the situation is not stable. And now I don't justify this for our president now because now I don't see that he represents me even. Because, you know, both governments in the West Bank and Gaza are illegal now. Now he's, you know, he's about to end his term. You know, he's very old now, and he wants to end it maybe with something, you know, that counts. in the Palestinian
you are
area.
saying that you don't feel that he represents you. So who does represent you?
No, in Gaza, you know, Abbas lost his credibility a long time ago. He abandoned Gaza since Hamas took control of the Gaza Strip. During the war, he didn't even file for the criminal court for the victims of the war, the last 3 wars, not only last year, but the past 3 wars. Many victims from Gaza are still waiting to get their rights back. The reconstruction in Gaza didn't start. Nothing happened. So people in Gaza see that Abbas abandoned the Gaza Strip. Now we need a new leadership. We call for new elections. Not only, we don't even want Hamas in Gaza. We don't even want the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. We need unity government that represents the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza and all over the occupied territories. We don't only need Abbas. Abbas is old now, and he's getting old, and you know, he's about, you know, to end his political life. So maybe he wants something that counts, you know, just to win the public opinion of the Palestinians.
Madam Hani, Gaza resident and activist, thank you very, very much for this conversation. Look, the Palestinians are saying he's old. That's it. You know, I cannot not feel what Avi is saying here, because it is sad to see the Palestinian leader begging and asking for the world to help him because he cannot cope with the situation
Lucy,
anymore.
I would like to follow, you know, what Avi says about desperation. Look, in the first section of this program, we spoke, you know, in this platform, and you mentioned that his speech is like the speech of Arafat.
Yes.
Let me remind you that in his speeches, all his speeches, Arafat spoke about a peace of the braves. So Mahmoud Abbas cannot afford himself, if he is a brave, to be desperate, because if he is desperate, if he has a fatigue, he is really, you know, he can do nothing. So let's go for elections or resignate. I mean, you cannot continue leading the Palestinian people without doing anything. Look, this speech is deepening the stagnation instead of moving on. I would like to move on, but what he did is he stopped it. He stopped it.
I don't think the problem is just what President Mahmoud Abbas can do or cannot do. The problem is the whole situation is very complicated. We have an Israeli government who doesn't want to go any single, even very small step towards the peace process. They refuses the reference of the peace process, the establishing 2 states based on 1967 borders. This is something that the Israeli government refuses totally. So it is a problem, a dilemma for President Mahmoud Abbas and for the Palestinian leadership also, that there is no partner in Israel.
The feeling among the Palestinians that there is no partner on the Israeli side, it cannot be blamed.
And that there is no Palestinian Authority, actually. It's not only about the Israelis anymore, it's about the Israelis and about the Palestinian Authority. Look, I visited today 3 different refugee camps, Kalandia, El Amari, and Gilazun, all of them in the Ramallah area. And what I heard from the people is complete desperation. Then again, they continued the line that we heard tonight from President Abbas, but they are the ones that are saying it loudly more than ever again. I think that what we had seen in Abbas's speech is very interesting. Yes, it is desperation, but there's lack of interest in a direct confrontation with the state of Israel. He didn't announce the canceling of Oslo Agreement. Then again, he said, if Israel will continue to do this, and then we will do that. I think that what he said was the art of maneuvering, meaning he didn't say completely we're not against the Oslo Agreement. He said we're not favor with the Oslo Agreement, and I think that was a lot of maneuvering. Nothing really direct, nothing really that had real essence, but at the end, just maneuvering. And 3, it was like just what was described in the Palestinian media and the Arab media, kunbulat sot. I don't know how to define it exactly in English,
a bomb of sound.
A sound bomb or something like that. At the end of the day,
sound bomb is destructive. It's dangerous.
Yes. At the end of the day, what I feel, and this is my gut saying that it's not clear indications. I think that Abbas is looking to renew the negotiations with the state of Israel. That was the message that he sent to Bibi Netanyahu 2 weeks ago through Meir Shitrit.
But in days of violence, when the streets of the Palestinian Authority, when the streets of the Palestinians are actually furious, you know, it's going with violence. Everybody's out on the streets. This message from Mahmoud Abbas can, although he's saying we're not going to react with violence, this message from Mahmoud Abbas can bring the Palestinian youth, give them a green light to go out and do whatever they want.
I don't think so. I don't think that was the message. And I think that even today, if you had seen what happened in the Palestinian cities, yes, a few conferences, meetings in the downtown cities with the screens of the President Mahmoud Abbas speaking, that's it. There wasn't anything more than that. We didn't see even parades like we had seen yesterday about Al-Aqsa. Nothing like direct confrontations. And I think that at the end, the only way that is still open for Mahmoud Abbas is still dependent upon Netanyahu, who's willing to negotiate with him. And the paradox is that Netanyahu's approach on the security issues is dependent upon Mahmoud Abbas's will not to go to a third uprising.
You know, we got to a situation here in the region, the Palestinians and the Israelis, that they are so connected in the security arrangements, so connected in the economy, so connected in a lot of perspectives in their daily lives, that it's almost impossible to separate whether they like it or not.
Lucy, I think that the solution between us and the Palestinians is clear to most Israelis and to most Palestinians. Everybody knows exactly what we are talking about when we are saying two-state solution. But I will give you some paradox, you know, repeated by the Palestinians, and this is why really I was deceived. President Abbas spoke about the international resolutions as the basis. One of these most important resolutions is Resolution 242. And this 242 doesn't speak about 1967. But now if nobody is talking about 242, and everybody is repeating, we have to go back to the lines of 1967. You know, this is the change because of the narratives that we listen. I think that the situation or the solution is clear. There is a lack of willingness from both sides.
We're going out. First of all, thank you very much, Ambassador Lebanon, for being with me. We're going out for a small break, 2 minutes, and I'll be back for the third part of the news today. Don't go away. Amid unrest at home in the West Bank, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas addresses the UN General Assembly and says Palestinian is no longer bound by agreements with Israel. Russia begins launching airstrikes in Syria after a unanimous vote in parliament to authorize the move, as Putin says he is counting on Bashar al-Assad to be ready to compromise over Syria's future. And NATO special forces are in Kunduz to support Afghan troops after Taliban insurgents seized the city, shoring up a major victory.
The News Today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening and welcome back to the news today. Mahmoud Abbas just a few minutes ago finished his address to the UN, where he just put on the table the bombshell that he spoke about, where he is threatening Israel by canceling all the agreements if Israel will continue occupying and continue its behavior and lack of peace process in the Middle East, or between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Let's see some of the highlights of the speech of Mahmoud Abbas.
Israel has destroyed the foundations upon which the political and security agreements are based, which have also been undermined by the measures taken by successive Israeli governments that have negated the transitional phase aimed at realizing the independence of our state and has thus perpetrated gross violations. All this has made the situation unsustainable. We therefore declare that we cannot continue to be bound by these signed agreements with Israel, and Israel must assume fully all its responsibilities as an occupying power, because the status quo cannot continue.
And with me here in the studio to continue this discussion about the speech of Mahmoud Abbas's military correspondent, Shai Ben-Ari. Good evening.
Good evening.
And also senior Middle East analyst, still with me, Avi Sakhov. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
So, okay, let's start hearing. Ashraf al-Ajrami, former Palestinian minister, was sitting here basically saying, the situation is complicated. These people said enough. We heard Maham saying, the activist from the Gaza Strip saying, that's it. We need a new leadership. We are done with leaders who don't know what they want because we are suffering. And this comes, and President Mahmoud Abbas is in a deadlock.
Look, I wouldn't say that it's even a disappointment, because if it was some kind of a hopeful speech to the Palestinian people, I would say that that was a disappointment. Bottom line, the Palestinian street didn't really believe that Mahmoud Abbas is going to come with any kind of a big dramatic conclusion. So it wasn't even a disappointment. Everything that I heard today in Ramallah, starting from kids to youth to young people and old people, was kalam fadi, meaning talks for nothing, empty words. They didn't expect Mahmoud Abbas to bring something new, and I think that that was the general feeling. That is Mahmoud Abbas's problem. But right now he's in a dead end. He doesn't have any kind of options. Yes, he can resign, but that wouldn't leave him anywhere new. That wouldn't leave any kind of historic measures on the ground that he, Mahmoud Abbas, led the Palestinian people to. So I would say that at the end he needs to choose between the bad and the worse. And the worst would be probably a third uprising and leaving everything. The bad maybe is to retry again to negotiate with the state of Israel. And maybe because of that, the speech tonight wasn't a very confrontational speeches. I heard worse speeches from Mahmoud Abbas, and bottom line, he didn't say the magic words, we're canceling everything with the state of Israel.
What does it mean? Because right now we're talking, the most important thing between the Israelis and the Palestinians is the security coordination. What will it mean on the ground? Basically, maybe because it's kalam fadi, empty words, tomorrow will be the same day. The Israelis and the Palestinians will continue cooperating on the ground, and that's it.
Despite the rather dramatic statement from the Palestinian Authority president, there is a lot of haze here. It's not clear exactly what will happen tomorrow, let's say. As Avi mentioned, we're not getting into the gritty details. He didn't get into the gritty details, and there was no cancellation of any specific agreement. There was no resignation. There was no cancellation of military coordination, which indeed would have been a very dramatic sort of statement to make on the UN stage like that. I think a really interesting question is currently on the table. What will be the response of Prime Minister Netanyahu tomorrow? I think there is a temptation for him specifically to answer this statement with silence, basically, because we're seeing that the world in general, President Obama and other leaders, are basically ignoring this issue at the moment, at least on the UN stage. They're busy with other things that are a little more dramatic, let's say, and I think it would be quite a statement from Netanyahu to answer this dramatic statement with simply silence. I'm not sure he will that he will basically go forward without temptation, because he likes those props and he likes.
What are the chances that Benjamin Netanyahu will also start with the clashes on the Temple Mount?
That could be, and I think that would be a pretty decent opportunity to pull out some sort of proper gimmick. I'm not sure if he has the time, because he's got like 24 hours. If he can get the prop team ready and able.
Count on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to say something and to talk about this. As Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas addressed the UN General Assembly on the ground, it seems to be a status quo, with Israel striking Hamas military positions in Gaza in retaliation for rocket fire into Israel. Correspondent Shai Ben-Ari has the details.
This is what remains of a Hamas police facility located on a beach to the north of Gaza City, following Israeli airstrikes overnight, which also targeted 3 other Hamas military facilities in the area of Gaza City itself. Palestinian sources noted no one was hurt in the strikes as the buildings were empty. The airstrikes were in response to yet more rocket fire towards Israel from the Gaza Strip. On Tuesday night, around 10:45 p.m. local time, a Grad rocket was fired towards the southern Israeli city of Ashdod. It was intercepted mid-flight by Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system. No injuries and no material damage were caused. It was the first time a Grad had been intercepted over Ashdod, more than 20 kilometers from the Gaza Strip, since Operation Protective Edge over a year ago. Gaza militants have continued firing rockets at Israel in recent months, but most have targeted areas closer to the Strip itself. Israel maintains a policy of holding Hamas responsible for all violence emerging from the Strip, even when it is not doing the actual firing. An organization known as the Omar Khadid Brigades, which is linked to the Islamic State terrorist group, took credit for the rocket fire Tuesday, claiming it was in response to the killing of an 18-year-old Palestinian girl in Hebron last week by the Israeli military. The IDF said the girl was shot dead after attempting to stab a soldier. Despite the claim of the Omar Khadid Brigades, some in the Israeli military suspect that a different group, Islamic Jihad, is responsible, as they are known to be in possession of the relatively advanced Grad rockets. If an IS-linked organization has indeed managed to obtain advanced rockets, this represents a worrying development for Israel.
Yes, and let's go jump a little bit live to New York, to the General Assembly, and where we are seeing Ban Ki-moon taking the statement, and the Palestinian flag will be raised at the United Nations. Let's hear what Ban Ki-moon has to say.
The first step is ensuring that the West Bank and Gaza are integrated under a single authority. Now is the time to support initiatives which will preserve the two-state solution and create the conditions for a return to meaningful negotiations on the basis of an agreed framework. Now is the time to restore confidence by both Israelis and Palestinians for a peaceful settlement and, at last, the realization of two states for two peoples. I sincerely hope that a successful peace process will soon yield a day when we unfurl the Palestinian flag in its proper place among the family of nations as a sovereign member state of the United Nations. May the raising of this flag give rise to the hope among the Palestinian people and the international community that Palestinian statehood is achievable. Let us continue to work together to realize the aspirations that this flag carries. Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security. Mabruk. Thank you. Shukran jazilan.
Thank you, Your Excellency. May I now invite His Excellency Mr. Mahmoud Abbas, President of the State of Palestine, to deliver his remarks.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. باسم شعبنا الفلسطيني أرفع علم دولة فلسطين على مقر الأمم المتحدة.
Okay, maybe after, let's say, this speech that he gave, that you are saying that wasn't the worst speech. This is let's say, a good support to see the flag being raised in the UN.
Yes, it was a kind of a confrontational and not confrontational speech. It was kind of a reaching out your hand for peace, but not reaching out your hands for peace. That was full of maneuvering from the side of Mahmoud Abbas. And at the end, he needed to find some kind of a ladder to get off this high tree that he climbed upon 2 or 3 weeks ago in one of his interviews to the Arab media, saying that he will drop a bomb. Now, we all understand that that wasn't a bomb, but he needed to show his people that it's a kind of a bomb. And this is why I'm defining it as a kind of a voice bomb or a sound bomb that usually soldiers are using in order to create panic, but panic for a second or two, not more than that.
You know, I'm trying to remember, let's say, I'm trying to remember the interview that I conducted with Saeb Arikat. It was, I think, 18 months ago. And I remember sitting down with him and getting out of his office. The first thing that it came into my mind is that they are desperate. They are tired. They just don't have the strength anymore to continue this, and that Israel is saying yes, Israel is saying no. And they're saying yes, Gaza, no Gaza. Yes, Palestinians, no Palestinians. And the Palestinians maybe had enough with, let's say, running after Israel for, especially after this specific government, for some kind of a sit-up in a table, and let's say at least a small kumbaya.
Right. Certainly, there's a certain weariness there, and there were even expectations that the Palestinian Authority president might even use the word weary. I don't think he used it in the end, at least not in the translation that we heard. But certainly, there is a problem here where every year this UN General Assembly comes upon us, and the Palestinian president always finds himself in a position where he's made all sorts of hints, and there are all sorts of rumors circulating about what exactly he will say. This isn't the first time we've been at this junction. 3-4 years ago, there was September. What will happen in September when President Abbas will arrive to the UN and make his various declarations? He made some pretty dramatic declarations back then, after which, indeed, a process began where the Palestinian Authority gradually was recognized as a state by various nations and parliaments. You could say that certain progress is being made from the Palestinian point of view, but on the ground, is much changing? No. Basically, the Palestinian people continue to suffer in many from all sides. Basically, like the president himself said.
We have the first reaction from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that a lie, and that this speech is inciting again.
Of course.
So it means when maybe
then again, kalam fadi from both sides. I mean, talks for nothing from both sides. And I think that it's very interesting for us to notice that 2 weeks ago, Mahmoud Abbas had a meeting with former minister Meir Shitrit in the Muqata in Ramallah, a very secret meeting. During this meeting, he asked Meir Shitrit to pass a message to Benjamin Netanyahu that he wants to meet and he wants to renew the negotiations over the peace process. Netanyahu said yes, and for some reason, the American administration was the one that brought to the cancellation of this meeting. It was the one that was the obstacle for the meeting to go ahead and happen. And at the end, what Kerry asked both sides is to delay it after the meeting in New York, after the General Assembly meeting in New York. For some reason, I cannot really understand, but hey, about the American policy in the Middle East, we cannot understand them for years.
Yeah, who can understand them, Shai? We're just seeing right now a flag being raised in the UN. It could be a historic moment.
It's an exciting moment.
It's an exciting moment.
In one of my meetings in Ramallah, one of the people that are living in one of the refugee camps told me, listen, in '87, during the first Intifada, the Israeli forces, the IDF forces, were arresting each and every Palestinian that tried to raise the flag. Today, we are raising the Palestinian flag in the UN, and that means something. That is a symbolic moment for us.
And you can see foreign ministers of large nations here, like the French foreign minister Laurent Fabius was, of course, here as well as the Russian foreign minister, less surprising. But you can see that there is international support for a certain progress with the Palestinian entity.
And even the Prime Minister of Lebanon, that doesn't have a government in Lebanon, but he came over there in order to take part in this.
You know, it's very.
This is the personal aide of Mahmoud Abbas standing over there with the bodyguard.
Yes, it's amazing that when we are seeing this, especially in a General Assembly, well, almost nobody mentioned the Palestinians, not even the United States. Maybe Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the president of Argentina, but at the end of the day, there is a flag in the UN being raised of the Palestinians. no wind to actually see the flag, see it in its whole glory. No luck.
Glory,
You're staying with me, by the way, because we're going to talk about the big story of the day. You prepared for us a big report about that, and the real story of, Charles prepared for us the big story for that. Thank you very much, Shai, for being with me in this section. Russia launched airstrikes in Syria today, purportedly against the Islamic State, but according to multiple sources, rebel groups were in fact targeted. The U.S. and Russian foreign ministers reportedly spoke by phone amid the heated tension during which John Kerry described Moscow's actions as dangerous. I-24 News correspondent Charles Publizer has more.
Decisive and immediate action. Russian assets pounded targets in Syria just hours after President Vladimir Putin secured the unanimous backing of parliament to commence the air campaign.
Our actions will be performed in very strictly set frames. First of all, we will support the Syrian army only in its legitimate fight, specifically against terrorist groups. Secondly, the support will be from the air, without participation in ground operations. And third, such support will be limited in time.
For its part, Damascus confirmed the intervention was solicited.
The Presidential Office of the Syrian Arab Republic made the request through a letter sent by President Bashar al-Assad to President Vladimir Putin. It included a call to send Russia's Air Force with the goal to fight terrorism.
But according to U.S. officials, Wednesday's strikes might not have been limited to IS-held territory, calling into question Moscow's stated objective. Despite a Russian insistence that Syria's airspace be temporarily shut down to American jets, the Pentagon said it would continue to fly regular sorties. While Moscow reportedly provided the Americans with 1 hour advanced warning prior to launching the strikes, coordination between the two former Cold War foes remains limited. Moreover, Moscow's position on Assad is at odds with Washington's, although Putin stated Wednesday he expects Syria's leader to compromise over his future. Irrespective of their obvious differences, Moscow is leaving open the possibility for a united front.
Mindful of the growth of the threat posed by the Islamic State, there is a need now to forge practical cooperation of the activities of all forces which are countering terrorism.
The Kremlin's military activity comes amid reports that Russian personnel have likewise been deployed to Baghdad. This on the heels of an agreement forged between Iraq, Iran, Syria, and Russia to coordinate in the fight against the IS. Conspicuously absent from the budding coalition is the United States, which for over 1 year has been spearheading operations against the terror group. But having conducted only a few thousand strikes over that time, coupled with Washington's failure to train moderate Syrian rebels, the anti-Islamic State leadership mantle appears up for grabs.
Yes, and with me still here is two senior Middle East analysts, Ali Waqid and Avi Sakharov. Good evening. What? Two.
The opposite.
Avi Sakharov, Ali Waqid. Okay, no, well, you understand what I mean. Okay, let's. Who said the phrase, if you want to shoot, shoot, don't talk? This is what Russia is doing.
Lucy, I think that we should remember the September 13th in the afternoon when the Russian, for the first time, publicly led the world knowing that they are involved in the Syrian crisis, and they are a major actor now in the Syrian crisis. When I talked yesterday with Syrian sources, they said that the Russians said the following: we want to see a dramatic, serious change in the situation in Syria by spring 2016. We will not allow this so-called war against the Islamic State be continuing until the endless. The Russians think that there was not really a coalition against the Islamic State, and that Putin emphasized in his speech that only the Syrian regime and the Kurdish forces were the only sides that really fought the Islamic State.
But when we are seeing that the first strike that Russia is taking, and it's hitting the Free Syrian Army. This means that...
this is according to American and Western sources. Yeah, it's
but this means that somebody can trust the Russians actually to do the job, or it was on purpose to say, okay, we're sending a message.
Look, it reminds me of Turkey. The war that Turkey declared upon ISIS, and at the end they bombed the Kurds. They didn't bomb ISIS. And
they needed a reason.
The Russians right now are not concentrating on fighting against ISIS. They're fighting on behalf of Bashar al-Assad. They're trying to keep Bashar al-Assad in power, meaning they're going to take care, first of all, the Free Syrian Army, and maybe later on to get to ISIS. But I think that
they're
it's
also sending a message to Bashar al-Assad telling him, listen, you might not stay. You might maybe need to compromise about you staying
Maybe,
here.
yes. Maybe he will need to go to some kind of elections in the future. But for the meanwhile, the first thing that they are doing on the ground is attacking the Free Syrian Army, or maybe not the Free Syrian Army, maybe the Fatah brigades up in the north, not far from Latakia, maybe some other militant groups in Syria, but the target is not ISIS. And this is fascinating to see, to understand that the Russians right now are focusing on keeping Bashar al-Assad. Later on, everything is possible.
We are based right now on Western and Arab sources that are anti the Syrian regime in bringing the story that the target that were targeted were not the Islamic State. But I do agree with Avi Zaharov that for the Russian, all the opposition, all the components of the Syrian armed opposition are the targets of the Russian, and we should pay attention to two processes that the Russian are carrying out on parallel. They are building what they consider a legitimate opposition that is consulting with the Russian about the peace process, the future of Syria. Some of them are located and based in Russia, unlike those who are located in Turkey, for example, that the Russians do not recognize, and they are fighting. And on the other hand, on the ground, fighting every party that is against the regime and against the Russian interests.
You know, but there are so many hands in this specific story. There is Russia, there is Syria, there is Israel, there is France, there is Saudi Arabia. In this specific story, there are so many hands. The real question, can the Russians be trusted to actually do the job?
The Russians have interest. They are not doing so in order to stop the bloodshed in Syria. They are doing so in order to keep a regime.
I'm asking on behalf of Bashar al-Assad. You know, on behalf of Bashar al-Assad, can they be trusted to actually do the job and fight ISIS?
Lucy, there is another actor that we are not taking into consideration, at least in this conversation, and it is Iran, of course. I do believe that in a moment the Russian will be ready to discuss maybe keeping the regime, but not Assad, okay? Because they will not give up the regime. This is a point. Let's go to the next point. The regime is fundamental for the Russian. Now, whether Bashar Assad or any other person, it is to be questioned. But we should take into consideration Iran. And President Obama said the two first actors that he mentioned in his speech as partners in the Syrian deal, in Syrian issue, is Russia and Iran. And Iran, I don't think, will give up so quickly Bashar Assad.
You want one sentence, Abi?
I think that it's, then again, it's fascinating to see what is happening here on the ground. Right now, we see some kind of coordination between Russia, the US, even Israel. But just imagine to yourself what will happen if, just like what happened in January this year, if Israel will try to assassinate or to kill some member of the Revolutionary Guards of Iran or a Hezbollah member by sending a drone or sending an airplane, and the Russians won't like it.
Okay, but we also mentioned here France, and somebody just woke up suddenly, and amid much discussion over the U.S. and Russian conflicting views on the Russian war, France has launched a probe into the Assad regime for alleged crimes against humanity. On September 15, Paris prosecutors opened a preliminary inquiry into alleged crimes committed between 2011 and 2013. It's largely based on evidence from a former Syrian army photographer. Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius said France had responsibility to take action. And right now, joining me on the phone is terror expert author Jean-Paul Ney. Good evening. Good to hear you again, and good to have you with us.
Hello, Bart. Hey, good to hear you again.
Jean-Paul, okay, how come they remembered? And, we're talking about evidence that is coming from a photographer about what happened in 2011 and 2013. What, they woke up and smelled the blood suddenly?
You know, the problem we have actually in France is that the government, the root of everything, is not just about a photographer, it's not about chemical weapons. Everybody knows that Assad used and the rebels and ISIL used and still using chemical weapons. All competent, intelligent secret services know about it. Even the French military intelligence, our DRM knows that. But you know, in France, the government wants to know nothing about Assad. And you know, Putin sees further. Firstly, it protects its pré-carré, you know, as we say in French, its geopolitical area. Then
yes.
The interests converge, as in Latakia region aims to protect the Alawites, you know, and that's the most important because they are almost 2 million of Alawites in this area,
yes,
which is both strategic for Assad and Putin, you know.
Yeah, Jean-Paul, unfortunately, I don't have more time with you, but I promise you tomorrow we will have another conversation. Jean-Paul, thank you very, very much for this. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with me in this part. And we're going out for a small break, 2 minutes, and I'll be back. Amid unrest at home in the West Bank, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas addresses the UN General Assembly and says Palestine is no longer bound by agreements with Israel. Russia begins launching airstrikes in Syria after a unanimous vote in the parliament to authorize the move, as Putin says he's counting on Bashar al-Assad to be ready to compromise over Syria's future. And NATO special forces are in Kunduz to support Afghan troops after Taliban insurgents seized the city, shoring up a major victory. Welcome back to the news today, and we're continuing with Kunduz, to the fight in Kunduz in Afghanistan after the Taliban has gained hold for the first time in 14 years. NATO forces today entered the city to support Afghan troops with heavy fighting underway. MS66 has the latest.
An escalation in the battle on the Taliban in Kunduz as NATO special forces have joined Afghan troops to retake the strategic northern Afghan city from the Islamic fundamentalist movement. Kunduz is the first major city in Afghanistan to surrender to the Taliban since 2001. Now, the only region in the greater Kunduz area still under government control is the airport, located a few miles outside the city. Around 5,000 police and local government officials are now holed up in the airport after retreating in face of Taliban advances.
The situation is good. Some of the areas are now under the control of Afghan security forces. Our clearance operation is going on. So far, we have retaken police headquarters, the prison, and some other parts of the city.
A spokesman for U.S. forces in Afghanistan said that aside from the NATO special forces, the Afghani government has also called in an American airstrike on insurgent positions. The situation is becoming increasingly dire for residents of Kunduz, where Taliban fighters are reportedly now patrolling the streets, showing mercy only to those who surrender.
Kunduz is under fire as a result of the conflict of these past few days. The situation is very bad. All of the residents are fed up with the situation, and thousands of families are escaping the province.
Although the U.S. and NATO have officially handed over the battle against the Taliban to Afghan forces, the terms of their mission allows them to fight when they come under direct threat. If the airport outside of Kunduz falls as well, the Taliban will control all access to the city, making any operation to claim it back much more challenging.
And with me right now here in the studio is defense and government analyst for our daily newspaper, Amir Oren. Good evening.
Evening, Lucy.
Try to explain to me how the situation just like lifted into that.
you want to look at it very rationally, one could say from a Western outlook. But it is not so easy. We in the West would like, just like in the Windows software, to close files. The United States has closed the Iraq file, and now with the agreement, the Iran file, ostensibly. And the Afghanistan file, that has been closed long ago. What's happening here? How come the Afghanistan file is being reopened? Also,
like Iraq was reopened, like
right,
every single place in the Middle East is reopened.
True. And the other dimension of a Western outlook is that we look at nation states or at corporations. You are not only Lucy Aharish, you are I-24 News. You represent a certain logo, a certain icon, values. In Afghanistan, it's a loose confederation of tribes, of families. You have the Haqqani network. It's a group of families acting. You have the Taliban, of course, and it is not simply a narrative, a linear narrative whereby an army wins and then the enemy falls back and the war is over. It's a never-ending war.
You know, because when we are hearing Taliban, when we are hearing Al-Qaeda, the first thing that comes in our mind is September 11. We are seeing this horrible images and we're saying, what, are we about to experience this? Or this is just, let's say, a whisper in the woods of Afghanistan that they are doing some noise.
Well, September the 12th, the day after September the 11th, or actually it was October when the Americans invaded Afghanistan, was to punish those who gave a safe haven to Al-Qaeda. It was not in order to catch bin Laden or to win over Al-Qaeda. And the US, under President Bush, went into Afghanistan after it was no longer effective to fight those who perpetrated the crime of 9/11. And here, the United States sees, just like in any other place, such as Iraq or Syria, where there is no effective central government, it's provinces, districts, movements, tribes, and the United States, at the height of the Afghanistan war, had 100,000 soldiers there. Now it has less than 1/10 the number, 9,000 or so. And these are only special forces advisors. Now they come under attack, so they fight back. But this is not the return of the American war in Afghanistan.
So let's join to this conversation with Colonel Richard Camp, who's in New York right now with me on the phone. Good evening.
Hello.
So, Colonel Camp, that what happens when you don't finish up the business?
Well, the problem is, of course, that it's not so much a failure to finish it. It's a will to actually to allocate enough resources and put in enough military power into Afghanistan to do the job properly. The Americans did actually conduct a troop surge in Afghanistan, but it was not really sufficient to deal with the problem as it needed to be dealt with. And the other issue, I mean, that's one part of it, actually physically tackling the Taliban and Al-Qaeda head-on in Afghanistan. It's one part of it. The other part of it, which I think has not been handled effectively, and I don't say it could have necessarily been done any better, actually, because it's a difficult problem, is actually dealing with the Pakistan government and stopping Pakistan from supporting the Taliban. Without the support of Pakistan military and intelligence services, the Taliban insurgency would not have been anything like as effective as it has been. And effectively, our forces out there had their hands tied behind their back by the strength of support from Pakistan.
So, Colonel Camp, you're saying that basically maybe we are talking about the army of Afghanistan doesn't have enough power to actually fight it. But on the other hand, we're looking at the Taliban, who is, let's say, relatively really weak to actually handle another war. So they are just shooting at each other?
Well, there are a few problems here, one of which, I mean, clearly the Taliban have exploited the fact that the West have reduced their forces in Afghanistan, and it's essential we don't reduce them any further because we have to maintain air power, we have to maintain surveillance and intelligence capability to back up the Afghan security forces. But one of the problems is that the we've got an under-resourced Afghan army, which is under-resourced in terms of air power and various other important matters. Also, it's working to a corrupt government, and you can't actually command the loyalty of armed forces easily if the government is corrupt, and that's what the situation is in Afghanistan. And a lot of the time the troops don't actually receive their pay. You have huge numbers of desertions, etc. So that's part of the issue. The other part is that they've been equipped with some quite sophisticated Western military equipment, which they find it hard to maintain, and it doesn't get used properly. And at the same time, the Afghan National Security Forces are being restrained by having Western standards imposed upon them, restrained from fighting the Taliban in the way that perhaps the Northern Alliance used to fight the Taliban. In other words, unrestrained violence, using the same type of tactics against the Taliban used against them.
Yes, Colonel Richard Kemp, I believe that seeing these images, I think that you're pretty happy that you're right now in New York and not maybe there.
I'd be happy to be where you are.
Colonel Richard Kemp, thank you very much for this.
Well, victory as defined originally by military planners is relatively easy to achieve. It may be costly, but it's easy. You remember the banner "Mission Accomplished," which awaited President Bush after the Iraqi war on the aircraft carrier. The problem is with sustaining this victory for many years, and this, of course, requires political will, and Western democracies do not have this will to go on and on and on, 14 years on, maybe 140 years, because the so-called great game of Afghanistan and Pakistan will go on forever.
You know, Afghanistan and Pakistan and Taliban, you know, what were the chances actually that the United States, you know, because we're looking at history and we're seeing that history repeats itself and we're seeing that somebody else is getting into the vacuum. What are the chances that the United States will actually be able to defeat the Taliban or to defeat the IS?
Yes, the United States will be able to defeat either of these enemies only if it redefines the term victory so that it could go home after declaring that it won. Under the current definitions, victory is not achievable.
So what you're saying is basically two words that Benjamin Netanyahu loves really much: status quo, which is, and today Mahmoud Abbas showed him that he doesn't like these words. Amir Oren, thank you very much.
I'm happy to be where you are.
I'm happy that you're here also.
Just like Colonel Kemp. Yeah.
Amir Oren, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy.
Now to the latest in the race for the White House. GOP White House hopeful Donald Trump reappearing on Fox News after he said that he is boycotting the network, all while a former president takes shots at the billionaire on behalf of the Democratic presidential frontrunner. ABC's Stephanie Ramos has the details.
Clinton versus Trump. This time it's Bill taking a swing at the GOP presidential contender.
You shouldn't be able to insult your way to the White House.
In an interview with CNN, the former president firing back at the Donald after months of attacking Hillary, calling them fact-free.
She's the worst Secretary of State in the history of our country.
Clinton defended his wife's tenure, pointing to the Iran sanctions, saying Hillary's deal was controversial but well done. He added Trump's criticisms would be broken down in a general election, and the facts would easily come to light.
The day after you take the oath of office,
it's yours.
You can't level an insult or you're not in an episode of Survivor. You're actually supposed to show up and run the show.
Meanwhile, Trump made peace with Fox News.
I'm back.
After saying he'd boycott the network, he reflected on the conflict in Syria, praising Vladimir Putin and his support of President Bashar al-Assad. The issue took top billing at the UN General Assembly.
Putin is now taking over what we started, and he's going into Syria, and he frankly wants to fight ISIS, and I think that's a wonderful thing.
And yes, I'm here with Dov Lipman, former member of Israeli parliament. Dov, you know, okay, let's not talk about Trump, okay?
Yeah,
Let's talk about Bill Clinton. Let's talk about the man going up and protecting his wife after she protected him for a long, long time. And God knows that she needs that right now.
I really think that they had to play this card a lot earlier than they were planning on it. Bill Clinton, when he speaks, and I watched the interview, he draws you in, he's smooth, and he was able to just deal with her issues. Emails, not a problem. Let me explain it. Just like I was the victim, she's the victim. And he does it with such clarity and grace, and you buy it. You watch the man and you buy it. They brought that card out a lot earlier. I think Hillary's struggling to just remove herself from this email.
Really early.
Very early.
To bring
and
the Bill
also,
Clinton card.
as I watched it, I was thinking to myself, this is a little bit of a warning shot towards the Joe Biden camp as well. Meaning, you want to enter this, now you're going to have to go against
Bill.
This is not against
But
Hillary.
you know, we are talking about a woman who wants to represent herself as a strong woman, as a woman who's independent. She is dealing with this campaign. She is standing alone in this campaign. She is talking. She was the Secretary of State. She was the, handling all the secret issues. And at the end of the day, she uses her husband.
But I don't think the average American is sitting back and making that analysis. You're right. You're 100% right. But the average person is sitting back, watches his explanation about the emails, and I actually compared the two. I watched him, and then I went back to watch her apology again. Her apology was not believable. It was not smooth. It didn't convince anyone. You watch him, he said, everyone's out to get her. She was a great Secretary of State. This is the only way they can bring her down. And you watch it, and you say, that poor woman. Everyone's out to get her. She was a great Secretary of State. She'll be a great president. It works. The man has charm, he's smart, and he's able to do it.
You know, just yesterday, Ayman Sikseké brought here a new book about Unlikable, the story of Hillary Clinton. And this book is trying to portray why Hillary Clinton is such a unlikable personality, is such a person who we cannot actually and I don't understand why we cannot actually see her and say, I believe her.
I think that it goes back to all the years that she was actually alongside Bill. It's fascinating. On the one hand, he has gotten a pass on so many things throughout, starting with his initial campaigns all the way through. I thought to myself, in today's world of the internet and Facebook and Twitter and the like, all the scandals that he had to weather, could he have done it if he was existing now? And I don't think so. And she stood there, but she's associated with him, and somehow she's not capable on her own of pulling herself out.
You know, it's when you are watching Hillary Clinton, there is a lot of people will tell you, we don't actually believe her. She's not reliable. She doesn't have this sense that you're, okay, even the smile is a little bit, it's full of hypocrisy and it's a little bit fake. But when I remember that Bill Clinton sat down and he said, I did not have sex with that woman. You said, of course he didn't. Of course he didn't. And you know, until today, he's maybe one of the most memorable presidents of the United States. And not because of Monica Lewinsky, but because him being a president.
And that's why when he looks at the camera in this interview and he says, here are the things that Hillary did as Secretary of State. This is where America was before, when she left office, and here are her accomplishments, and I'm telling you, and he looks at the camera, Hillary Clinton will be a great president. The American public buys it. And this is a warning shot to Joe Biden. This is going to help her in the polls. This is going to make Republicans go running. We haven't talked about his comments towards the Republicans yet. He has that ability, again, like you said, early but effective.
So let's talk, because there is a request from the control room to talk about the guy behind me and to talk about Donald Trump.
So there again, I think when Bill Clinton comes out and says, this man is full of nothing, there's nothing there, it's empty, where are his plans? I think his words were pizzazz and zip. I think Americans see former President Bill Clinton saying that, and something grabs, and they say, wait a minute, let's see if he's made of substance.
But when he's talking about a new tax program, when he's talking about cutting tax, this is maybe Donald Trump starting to understand that he cannot be the teenage, grumpy, I don't want to talk about that and that's it.
There's two reasons for that. One is when he stands on stage and a young person like Marco Rubio is giving facts and figures and plans and Trump is not, then the tide starts to turn. But even more than that, as Republicans start backing out, Scott Walker was the first, there'll be others, their support is not going to go to Donald Trump. It'll go to other of the mainstream candidates, and before we know it, he's going to be teetering, and therefore he has to come out with plans. But he comes out with this tax plan. Anybody making less than $25,000, no taxes. Any couple less than $50,000, no taxes. Sounds great, sounds pop, people like it. And then the experts who are nonpartisan come out and say that will balloon the deficit to $12 trillion. All of a sudden, it just pops the balloon and takes the air out, and that's where he's going to get into trouble.
Who do you think shined this week in the Republican
There's no doubt that Rubio is doing great, and the reason is Carly Fiorina, she had this meteoric rise, and everyone's attacking her. She's doing well. But Rubio just slowly, he's there, he's chipping away. Very few attacks against him. I think he's the person to start watching.
Did you talk with Charles before you came in?
I know that he loves Marco, though.
Dov Lipman, thank you very, very much for this.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. A woman in the U.S. state of Georgia has been executed despite a number of last-ditch appeals, including one by the Pope to try and block it. 47-year-old Kelly Gisson-Daner was the first woman put to death in the southern U.S. state in 70 years. Ur Shapiro has the story.
Dozens of friends, family members and supporters came to share the final moments with Kelly Renee Gisson-Daner, who was executed by lethal injection.
At 12:21 on September 30th, 2015, the court-ordered execution of Kelly Renee Gisson-Daner was carried out in accordance with state law.
Gisson-Daner is the first woman in 70 years to be executed in the state of Georgia and the 16th woman executed in the U.S. since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976.
She said she was sorry that that amazing man lost his life because of her. And once after the execution started, she began singing Amazing Grace and sang it all the way through.
47-year-old Gisson-Daner was convicted of conspiring with her lover, Gregory Owen, to kill her husband, Doug, in 1997. Gisson-Daner, however, didn't take part in the actual murder. Owen, who stabbed the husband to death, was only sentenced to life and is up for parole in 7 years. Last-minute attempts to stop the execution failed, including an appeal to the Supreme Court which denied clemency claims. Even Pope Francis himself, who addressed the U.S. Congress last week asking for the death penalty to be abolished and who sent a letter to the Board of Pardons and Parole, couldn't save her life.
Unnecessary punishment must never exclude the dimension of hope and the goal of rehabilitation.
Despite the outrage, a latest poll by the Pew Research Center shows that 56% of Americans favor the death penalty for those convicted of murder. But when cases like this throw a harsh spotlight on the death penalty, public opinion would like to send capital punishment to the guillotine.
And let's talk a little bit about the big scandal right now. We used to talk about FIFA as a big scandal. This is even bigger. And right now with me is Dr. Alex Cohen, value creation expert at the Academic College of Tel Aviv. And of course, we're going to talk about Volkswagen.
Absolutely. Hello, Lucy.
Okay. What is going to happen? This is just getting bigger and bigger by the minute.
Yes, I love it. Yes.
You love it.
Yes.
I don't think that the people of Volkswagen will agree with you about that.
Yes, but you know, every time you see a James Bond movie and you see dozens of people working on a corrupt project to destroy the world, you ask yourself, how is it possible? Now think about this. Somebody in Volkswagen found out that their engines are polluting beyond allowed limits. Somebody initiated the project. So I would assume that dozens of engineers, because you need to monitor in order to detect if they are testing you and falsify the data. You're talking about dozens of people working on this thing. Now, what annoys me actually is the fact that in the US, usually a company is treated as an entity, so that Volkswagen would pay a penalty of, say, $8 billion. But nobody goes to jail in the Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch, etc.
I want to see somebody behind bars with their nose squished on the bars and really, really aching.
But we're talking about not only going maybe behind bars, we're talking about losing million of dollars, and more than that each and every day that we're talking about it. There's one word that is repeating itself, is trust. How you can gain the trust back when you are doing such a big scam.
That's why I love it, because one of the, I think, the least effective things in business school when you teach people how to be executives is the ethics part. And I think that was one of the weakest courses I ever took, ethics. Because ethics assumes basically companies are good. And here you see one example, and I don't think that it's such an exception. It's true, Volkswagen had orgies in the past, things that you wouldn't believe. But when I'm talking about companies like Lehman Brothers, many of the scandals, you see companies that are corrupt, that are criminal. So I want people, I think it's a factor that people should think about companies just as people can be honest or dishonest.
Try to explain to me what will happen now when millions and millions of cars will be dragged out of the road and basically telling them you cannot drive anymore in this car. What will happen? So what, I will come to, for example, I have a new car, I will come to Volkswagen and I will tell them I'm getting a new car for that? Like in...
Well, honestly, I don't understand enough of the engineering, because it's not as if I could think, okay, so now they would install this thing that reduces the pollution. If they could do it, they would probably do it rather than do the whole crookery. Okay, so what you're saying is interesting. I didn't think about it, but it's interesting. If thousands of cars would be towed into a graveyard and left there to die because they're polluting beyond the levels.
You know, maybe it will be a new park or a new amusement park of a lot of cars of Volkswagen.
Or dumped into the ocean.
Love the way that I love it. I love the story. Dr. Alex Cohen, thank you very much. Always a pleasure having you here. And let's talk a little bit about art and Jewish art, and that is the question of 2015. The Jerusalem Biennial for Contemporary Jewish Art is trying to answer. Leah Bushusha went there to check if they succeeded.
What is contemporary Jewish art? One definition is a bridge between contemporary art and the Jewish world, and you can see it at the second Jerusalem Biennale. Featuring paintings, pictures, and video, the exhibit is located in a unique environment, right in the heart of the Holy City. Its goal? To explore the meaning of Jewish art by looking at artists from different cultures. But Jewish art is also a stimulus for dialogue between Jewish and non-Jewish artists, so says Rami Azeri, the founding director of the Jerusalem Biennale.
We have a few artists that are not Jewish but came to Israel, came to Jerusalem, and want to say something to us about what do they see, what do they think about us.
The event, created in 2013, attracts 200 artists this year, valuing the local and international art scene.
We hope people that are really interested in those issues and can take something from the Biennale to other fields, to the academia, to the politics, to media, will come and get the message from the creative people, like from the artists.
Representing forms and spaces in Jerusalem, the project Kom Shiv'i, line 70 in English from Israeli artist Dov Abramson, divides Jerusalem into 70 equal parts. Through this map with singular forms, the artist investigates the city he grew up in.
I grew up Orthodox, in an Orthodox Jewish home, and I've left the Orthodox way, but I'm always in discussion with Judaism and Judaism values, and the art is a way for me to express those issues that I have with the Jewish world.
Located in the northwest part in the Armenian quarter of the Old City, the ancient Tower of David Citadel is one of the major sites hosting the main exhibition, called Jerusalem Passages. The space hosts 5 different projects created by international and Israeli artists.
For many, many years, this museum was the museum of the history that tells the story of the history of the city and the meaning and the significance of this city to the 3 religions. We're talking about Jerusalem as, of course, physical city, but also as the meaning of conscience.
The exhibit will be held until November 5th.
And we're going out for an update from our news desk, and then we will be back for the think I stopped counting. I think the fourth part of the news today. Don't go anywhere, but we're still here. Why? Why you're doing it? Professor of Political Science, Dr. Hani Zubaydah, why are you doing it? Good evening.
Chair of the Political Science.
And correspondent Eli Ochenberg, diplomatic correspondent. Welcome back.
The well-behaved.
The well-behaved. You are well-behaved. And comparing to him, arguably everybody's well-behaved. You are here today, not on Thursday, because tomorrow you're going on vacation. So we decided to summarize the week in Israeli politics today. And what a week it was. In one short sentence, just tell me, what do you think about Mahmoud Abbas's speech, and how would Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu react to that, and how you are reading the map that will happen tomorrow?
Well, it's going to be a hectic weekend for the border patrol units at Mosque Al-Aqsa during the weekend, and I think the entire thing is coming up to a boiling point. It's not going to be good. That's my own opinion.
Okay, so let's go back to this. Positive, really positive.
On this positive note.
And on this positive note, there is a positive note. And we spoke a lot about the chief of police here in Israel. Eventually and finally, there was a guy that was chosen, and he is a pretty good guy.
Yes, he is. Definitely, and he, many of his colleagues has nothing else but good things to say about him. He was the deputy chair of the head of the security Israeli security service, the Shin Bet, and he was aimed at replacing the head of the security services in Israel. Again, a very solid candidate. He was offered this post before. He denied it, and now he accepted again. And tomorrow there's a committee that he will, the Turkey committee that he will perform in front of them. But that's not the main issue.
Yeah, the problem is not with his rankings, with the opinions on the person, on the way he acts and behaves.
Do you really think that there is a problem with him?
Yes, there is a huge problem. There's a debate going on right now, which relates to other aspects of his life. It relates to the yarmulke he has on his head. It relates to the fact that he used to live in a settlement. It relates to the fact that they're portraying him as an extreme right person. And it relates to the fact that they're saying he comes from an organization with a completely different organizational structure and organizational behavior, and he's going to have a hard time moving on to the police.
Maybe because he was one of the chief commanders in the Shin Bet. Maybe because he knows how to talk and how to speak in a different language that the police speaks. Maybe because he knows maybe the language of the other side. Maybe because of that, he can bring something new to the police that God knows how much the police in Israel needs a new blood and a new language to its forces.
Everybody agrees that the police cannot have somebody from within ranks going up to being the chief of police. Everybody agrees on that. The police is corrupt. Just yesterday, we found out that there's another officer at the very closed investigation unit that was leaking information outside to perpetrators. This guy is a must to the police. Not this guy, Al-Sheikh specifically, but a guy from the outside. The question now is politically more than organizationally. People reject his nomination on a political base. They argue that he's an extreme right person and he cannot be trusted. In an interview I conducted yesterday in my radio show, somebody told me, a very well-known reporter in Israel, Ran Edelist, said, I do not want him as the chief of police. And I asked why. He said, because he's an extreme right settler. And my question was, do you disqualify anyone who's a settler or has a yarmulke on his head? And he said, yes. And I think that would be a major issue.
And don't forget it, only last week in our political summary of the week, we were talking about a move by former Israeli ambassadors that tried to block the appointment of a settler, Dani Dayan, to be the Israeli ambassador in Brazil. So we see that not necessarily political nominations, but which are based on professional achievements, are turning the political turn either way.
I want to take this, and I want to ask you both. At the end of the day, at the end of the recent elections happening in Israel, there was a right-wing government elected by the people of Israel. And it seems that maybe the accusations of the right saying that the left is actually controlling this country, maybe they're right. Maybe at the end of the day, a right-wing government is nominating people that are coming from their side, right-wing. It should be a natural thing because it is a right-wing government. So what is the problem with that? Well, it should be like a natural thing.
I think the issue right now is not just the right. If they would have brought a centrist right person to this position, I do not think we would have the same mayhem. But they brought somebody who's from within the settlements, who has a yarmulke on his head, and he came from the Shin Bet. Regardless of the fact that he was the guy to inherit the head of the Shin Bet, Prado. He was the guy. He was nominated. He was marked. He is the target guy to be the head of the Shin Bet. This is why he rejected the first time they asked him to be the chief of police. I think right now what the people on the left are seeing and they're fearing is a control of the extreme right over major Israeli hubs, one of them chief of police. By the way, they do not even considering giving him 100 days of grace. Yeah. The battle has started at the day he was nominated. I do not think the Tirkol committee will find anything wrong with him because he comes from within the system, no private businesses, nothing. He's clear, white, no issues. I think he will be nominated, but I think from the day he's going to be nominated, he's going to be under a microscope.
Okay, so let's go to another subject, and we're talking about
the finance minister, Moshe Kahlon, which his agenda was, I'm going to break all the economical monopolies in Israel. I'm going to put some order in the business here. But his close relationship with one of the major Israeli businessmen who holds stocks in the Gaza inventory that Israel has, is now coming back to the headlines. Kahlon, before the elections, promised that neither of his personal relationship will affect his taking care of the gas issue. But now a new testimony Kahlon gave as part of a legal process between this businessman, Kobi Maimon, and his ex-wife are coming out. And we realize how close this relationship really is. And the questions which are rising is how much Kahlon really knew about Maimon's activities.
I want
to add briefly. This is an amazing story because when he was going for the election, he was not invited to give the testimony. The testimony was given after he said he does not care about his personal relationship, blah, blah, and so on and so forth. During his testimony, he was confronted with the business of Kobi Maimon, and he was baffled because according to him, he didn't know how big the pyramid of Maimon is. And as of that moment, I think he got a legal advice. You cannot be part of that because, as it seems now, the families were very closely tied. They went together on holidays to Toscana, Italy, other places. They have had a lot of social gathering together, and Kahlon rented offices from Kobi Maimon prior to the elections, paid for. But yet again, this reeks out of money and politics connection.
I want just to remind maybe Moshe Kahlon, and by that we're finishing, that Alexis Tsipras, when he promised things to his people and he couldn't actually do these things and deliver, he went to elections and he said, I promised, I didn't keep my promise. Now you decide if you're choosing me
Not
again.
Gonna happen.
Maybe Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon should do that. No?
Not going to happen.
No?
Great ending tone.
Okay. Thank you very much. Have a great time in your vacation.
Thank you
I hope that you will. You're going to a very, very not hectic place at all. And we're going to Maccabi Tel Aviv. Moving to sports, the Champions League group stage game to Israel last night with Maccabi Tel Aviv hosting Kiev, and against not much luck for the home Israeli team. Michael Friedman went to the stadium in Haifa and has the story.
After 11 long years, Maccabi Tel Aviv finally hosted a match in the group stage of the UEFA Champions League. The long journey, which saw the team beat Hibernians FC, Victoria Pilsen, and FC Basel to qualify, gave great joy to the players and fans in Israel. After a difficult first match against Chelsea, losing 4-0 in London, Maccabi hoped to bounce back against Dynamo Kiev. Supporters traveled to Sami Ofer Stadium in Haifa, providing an electrifying atmosphere with screaming fans. Prior to the match, the Israelis prayed with their Maccabi jerseys and scarves covering their heads. All of the fans believed qualifying for the group stage was a monumental achievement.
It's very, very special to be here in the big league of the big teams, you know, in the Champions League, and to see all the crowd, all the Israeli Maccabi's crowd here. It's such a good feeling.
But the Maccabi supporters knew they had a strong rival that night. With many Ukrainian fans coming from both far and near, some even had dual citizenship after immigrating to Israel. And for those Dynamo Kiev faithfuls, the match gave them great pride and happiness.
I came to Israel when I was 16, but every week I see the games on my TV. So it is not a question to support Kiev or not. It's here in my heart.
The match proved difficult for the Israeli side, who went down a goal after just 4 minutes. With the Dynamo Kiev team keeping possession and controlling the game, they came out victorious against Maccabi Tel Aviv, winning 2-0. Goal scorer Junior Moraes was very happy for this win, as his side hopes to make it past the group stage.
I have confidence in our team. And we know we have Chelsea and Port, Maccabi is a very difficult group, but we're gonna fight for this.
Despite the loss, the Israeli players are happy to be part of the Champions League and know they must continue to improve in the future.
We need to work now, to try to keep, on this level. Of course, to take again, if it's possible, the championship in Israel. And of course, to be in the Europe, we are now in Champions League to try to keep, if not the Europa League. And I think that Maccabi is a club that deserves to be in the Europe.
Although the result was not what the Maccabi players were hoping for, they felt the love of the fans every minute of the game.
We felt very excited, especially in this atmosphere. I think all our fans made a great job. They gave us 100% support during the whole game. And we are a little bit sad that we didn't give them a little bit better feeling.
With Maccabi Tel Aviv's next fixture away against Porto on October 20th, the team will have more chances to prove their worthiness in the Champions League as they seek European success.
And with me, somebody who's in the studio who's happy that Maccabi Tel Aviv lost.
No comment.
Jonathan Regan.
I come from the field of basketball. I'm from Jerusalem, and I support Hapoel Jerusalem, who are fierce rivals with Maccabi Tel Aviv in basketball. That's as far as I would say.
So you're happy.
What does that mean about football? I don't know.
But you have a big smile on your face.
Maybe I'm happy because the sun is shining in Israel at the end of September.
Oh, it's night now,
In the morning, what?
Let's talk about more Champions League.
Yeah, more Champions League. Maccabi Tel Aviv should not feel so bad. They're rather new to this competition. Look at what the English teams have done. Manchester United, they play tonight, but they lost their first match. So did Manchester City, who lost their first match. Arsenal and Chelsea both lost last night. So out of 6 matches that English teams have played so far, they have lost 5. And only Chelsea won their previous game. Who did they beat? Maccabi Tel Aviv, of course. But 6 games the English teams have won, have played. Only 1 they have won. 5 losses so far to English teams in the Champions League. Very strange because many people see the Premier League as the strongest league in Europe, and yet something is not working there. Maybe Man United and Man City will get things better tonight, we'll see.
Just the smile that you have.
No, because I support the Spanish teams. That's why.
Of course.
I support La Liga against the Premier League, so it helps me in the discussion.
Of course.
When I say, Spanish League is much better. Look at how the teams are doing in the Champions League. That's the reason for this.
Let's talk about someone that I didn't hear his name for a long, long time, Ronaldinho.
Yes, and maybe we will not hear his name again because...
Why you're so mean today?
No, I'm not mean at all. I'm just bringing the news. Ronaldinho, because he's from Brazil, that's why. Ronaldinho, here we're seeing him wearing the shirt of Fluminense. That's the club he joined 2 months ago, but he's already leaving the club because he did not find his form and he did not find his way. Ronaldinho, if you watched football in the previous decade, he was the man to watch. He won the World Cup with Brazil in 2002, was Player of the Year in 2005, 2006. But ever since, especially since he returned to Brazil from Spain where he played, things do not really work. He did not find his way in Flamengo and now in Fluminense. And at the age of 35, with his performances not being so good, maybe it's time to quit. Maybe.
35 is old.
In the world of football, it is.
In 1 year, I need to say that I'm old.
What am I gonna say? I'm
a
veteran's home.
Let's talk about the celebrations of goals.
In Argentina. Look at we've seen many celebrations. This guy, his name is Mariano Gorosito. He plays in the 4th division. The club is called Atlético Lujuy, if I say it correctly. And he scores. What does he do? He runs to the ambulance that's right next by. What? And he tells the driver, "Sound the horn, sound the horn." Which he didn't do. He got a yellow card.
And there is a big horn. Like, I need to finish the
Finish.
Thank you very much, Jonathan Reagan, for that really great way. And thank you for being with us tonight. Tomorrow we'll be here at the same time, same place from the Jaffa Port, Israel. Have a great night.